on maximizing skills for jobs and jobs for skills.
Maximizing skills for jobs and jobs for skilled. Hopefully this will be a session which will focus only somewhat on what the problems are and much more on what the solutions should be. What the solutions are is a very difficult thing to say. Before, of course, I ask Rahul to make his short presentation on it, I just wanted to share a few ideas with our panelists. One, of course, is that we all know about the numbers involved. So I won't go into the numbers, the demographic dividend, etc. I think all of us, I'm sure, are well aware of that. What I just wanted to flag are some things which are data related, is how little we know about what's happening in the country. But 3 days ago, the chief economist of the State Bank of India issued a report on how so many jobs have been created in the country. And the next day, Jairam Ramesh and somebody contradicted it. And then the SBI have again responded to it by saying, no, you guys are wrong, we have got the facts right. In the absence of sheer data, and I'll share one more piece of data. Now, I come from the poorest state in the country, which is Bihar. It is on paper the least urbanized state. And urbanization and per capita income have a fairly robust relationship. In Bihar, manual plowing in the last 7-8 years has completely is over. Even in Bihar, nobody now uses bulls for plowing. It's by tillers and tractors. Not surprisingly, in Bihar again, and there's a lovely study done by ICRISAT, more than 50% of rural incomes, 50% of rural incomes is from non-agricultural sources. So in other words, a shift is already happening in the economy. We keep talking about making agriculture productive by pulling people out of agriculture. That is happening, but it's happening in a manner that we don't know what is happening. And therefore the availability, the right kind of skills needed. Because please understand that the more developed you are as an economy, the more employers invest in the skills of their employees, invest in the sense that in times of downtrend, they want to retain the labor. They hoard labor, they don't let off labor, so that when the demand picks up, they will not have difficulty in hiring. Here we are in the opposite situation. And therefore, what are the kind of things we should be doing to convert it? Then Infosys can set up a massive center at Mysore. Of course, with the architecture, a lot to be doubted about that complex. But you cannot expect others to do so. And the strength of an economy, again, is not how big the big industries are, which are required, of course, but how big is the SME sector. And how much the SME sector can actually generate to dynamism and not get bogged down about 4 GST returns a year. That's a very minor part of the problem for them. How do we make the SME sector really vibrant to feed into the value chain? So these are very, very specific issues that we have to address. And at the same time, how technology disruption is so powerful. Now, Goa, for the last 3 days, there was a taxi strike against the entry of Uber into Goa. And if the taxi drivers had spoken to me, I would tell them that you are the beneficiaries of Uber, not the losers of Uber. Delhi has 1 lakh Uber taxis. As a result, a person like me, my family, we didn't buy a second car because we buy Uber. So the competition, Uber is posing a threat not to the black and yellow taxis as much as to the Marutis and the Hyundais of the world. So the kind of interrelationship in the economy that is happening. The OYO example, actually Airbnb example was given yesterday. So the Maruti factory, the new ones, how many people do they employ? The old ones, how many do the new employ? So the kind of transition which is happening simultaneously across sectors, across technologies, is something that we need to grapple with here and now. It's not something we can put off and hope that अपने आप ठीक हो जाएगा. अपने आप ठीक नहीं होगा. So what are the exact kind of things that we should be doing, that states should be doing, as they try to increase investment in their economies from specifically the MSME sector, not just big industries, but from the MSME sector, which will actually create the mass of employment that is required, and not employment of the lowest kind, unskilled kind, but employment with quality in it, which leads to growth. So with that, I think I'll stop here. I was asked to speak for 10 minutes. By my watch, I'm slightly short of that. So let me now request Rahul. to make your, and this is a presentation I really like. You'll find out why I really like the presentation. Come.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Sinha, for giving me the opportunity to throw some light on and just sharing very broad ideas as to what the session is all about. Can I have my presentation, please? Okay, so this session is on maximizing skills for jobs and jobs for skilled. CUTS International since the past year has been working on this initiative of identifying issues and challenges that determine the future of jobs in India. We have been doing multiple stakeholder consultations throughout the country since the past year. We plan to carry that forward in the coming year too. We try to gather a diverse group of people, opinion makers, journalists, entrepreneurs, industrialists, to gather in one room and just, try and understand what is it that is required to secure the future of jobs in India. So what are the broad issues and challenges that are being talked about? I'm sure a lot of it you may be reading in the newspapers, and most of them you may be aware about it. But just to give a direction to the panel that will be talking about the same. Underemployment, which broadly means low incomes and disguised unemployment. In today's Hindustan Times, if you read the business paper, there is a report that shows that Industrial Labour Organization has estimated that India will be having 77% unemployable people by 2019, which is just 12 months away. When I say unemployable, it does not mean that they will not get jobs. They do get jobs, but they may be underemployed. What does underemployment mean? You may be qualified as a graduate to hold skills in management, but eventually the kind of work that you get to do may not match your skills. You may not be even paid that much, which is underemployment. Robotics and digital automation. As we move ahead in transforming the country into a digital nation, we are accepting and we are adapting to the technological advancements. It is being seen as to be an important subject that is helping industries across sectors to become more productive and become more innovative. So we have to accept it, that automation and robotics is the way forward. They are going to create new kind of jobs in the future. But when it comes to understanding the current landscape of skilled labor that is there, and the immediate students that are going to pass out and join the labor force, what is it that they need to do to ensure that they are able to zinc into the world of robotics and automation in the near future? Talent and skills to match industry demand, that has been a problem, I think, for more than 30 years now. There are some states that are able to attract investments and start operations. They are able to create an ecosystem of skilled labor and, progress. But the other states, and that is the theme of our symposium as well, the North Indian states, have been striving to bring in investments in their state, convincing businesses to establish themselves in the states. But talent and skills is an issue which is a big hindrance to coming up. So the last panel, Dr. Kapoor also mentioned that the city of Chandigarh and the state of Punjab cannot be a tech state as compared to Karnataka. So what is it that they should look into? What are the alternates? And then that actually raises a question as to what are we trained for? What are we educated for? The education system and the entrepreneurship culture, do they actually match each other? The present education system, so I take my own example. When I was a student, when I was passing through the phase of kindergarten to 12th grade, and I'm sure most of us in this room also have passed through that stage of being given a perception that, once you are able to achieve good grades, you achieve a degree, you will get a job. Why is it that our education system doesn't teach us to become entrepreneurs? It is only at a stage when we are attaining the age of 20, 22, 23, when we are in college or we are just about to clear out our education, we are just about to exit the education system and enter into our professional careers, is the time that we are taught that, maybe you can think about becoming an entrepreneur. But I think it's too late then. Almost 10 years, between 15 years to 25 years, you just aren't prepared to become an entrepreneur. So isn't it that our education system should be transforming itself? And formal versus informal economy, Dr. Sinha just mentioned that it has been identified that the agricultural sector is no more a potential employable sector anymore. So what is it that can we do to help the informal economy, which is almost 80% of the entire job market in India? So while 20% are formal, they get their salaries, they get their provident fund and everything. The informal economy, on the other hand, which holds the maximum population of employable people, what is it that needs to be done that they are not been treated as informal in a sense, but they are also being appreciated and given the space of contributing towards the economy? With that, I would like to end my presentation with throwing out some basic points that can be discussed in the panel that we are about to kickstart with. So how do we create supplementary opportunities for self-employed? So when we talk about MSMEs and startups, a lot has been talked already. So they may be into a specific sector now, they might want to explore new opportunities, so an alternate business idea. What is it that can we do to support them so that they can easily exit the ones that we are operating right now and move to a new one? How do we increase the rural non-farm income? So the agriculture sector is no more recognized as a employable sector anymore. So what is it that can we do to increase the rural non-farm income? How do we reduce the interstate differences on skills and jobs? So we know that Punjab as a state cannot become a cannot create an ecosystem for the tech world, but it can surely become a strong ecosystem for the food sector. It's known as the food basket of India, So can we reduce the interstate differences? Maybe the tech skills of Karnataka can be utilized by the state of Punjab. The tourism of Uttarakhand can use the labor force of Uttar Pradesh. So how do we, create a cooperative environment for states to share the skill sets so that the interstate differences reduce, there is more prosperity and there is more harmony in the northern region? To ensure a whole of systems approach. So I'll just give one small example. So a lot of governments give a thrust to industries to set up factories. So maybe you get a commitment from a large conglomerate to open up a factory in the state of Punjab that is employing 2 lakh people. But is it sustainable in the long run? And is it going to change the things? there is no holistic approach right now when it comes to jobs and skills. So the education sector, the industrial sector, the state government, the ecosystem, the resources of the state, all have to be looked at once when we are trying to address the issue of jobs. And then in the end, how do we ensure that there is consistent and meaningful job creation that leads to sustainable livelihoods? We don't want people to be employable in the tech industry in Punjab and then 5 years down the line they identify themselves to be losing out to the other states. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rahul.
Yes.
I think you raised very, very relevant points, which I shall not repeat. We have 6 panelists, very rich experience between all of them. So let's start, and they have 7 minutes each. So let's start with Siddharth to bring both his government and his private sector experience into giving us some focused solutions.
Well, thank you, Shakti. We are all talking about this so-called change and disruption, which we all know is being driven by technology. And it is bound to, affect your social fabric, your demography, your education, your employment. And I think the key lies in being nimble. If you are not dynamic, you can't survive. The wave is coming. You're swimming on the shore, shallow waters. I mean, if the wave is coming, you better learn how to surf, or you'll either be engulfed or be swept aside. So this writing is very clear on the wall. I mean, if you look at what is happening, I was attending a seminar on information technology in New York, and one of the speakers, he said it in such a, straight frontal way. He said, you think the pace of change is fast? Let me tell you, it's the slowest you're going to face in the next 20 years. And he's absolutely right. And what has happened in the meanwhile? You have, of course, the Uberization. Everybody has been given the example, but what actually has happened in Uberization? You see, what's happening today is that, a number of micro and nano services are being offered as a bundle on a machine platform. So what does it need? It needs more human skills. It needs more dynamic human skills to marry this, human intelligence with machine intelligence. And it's only when this marriage takes place that you have new innovations. And these new innovations throw up the requirement for new kind of skills, new kind of jobs, which we should be in a position to fill up. Otherwise, the jobs will go begging, you will be without a job. So I think this, in a nutshell, I mean, the dynamic skilling, I think, is the key to all this disruption, change, and the need to, need to prepare people who have the required skills. Now, how to go about it? And then this thing happens every time, there is a change in the way you are producing. Whether it was the Industrial Revolution in 18th century, the steam engine came and the Luddites went into opposition saying that it should not happen, they'll lose their jobs. What happened after that? More development, more employment. 19th century, you had electricity, you had internal combustion engine. 20th century, you had electronics in the beginning, towards the end, you had your computers, internet. 21st century, AI. So there you are. There's no need to fear. It'll only throw up new opportunities. So what needs to be done? What needs to be done today? The main thing is, of course, you have to update your curriculum. The days of static education are over. You can't say that I have a degree, I should get a job. It's done with. You have to be up to date. Your entire course should be structured to the needs of the labor market, and not the other way around. And unless you pick up these market signals and you develop your courses accordingly, you cannot, meet the demand of the market. What is the demand of the market? I'll give you a small example towards the end. But what I want to say right now is that all your formal education should be it should be absolutely linked with your vocational training, and the vocational training should be clearly identified. You can't have, in the vague sense कि भाई vocational training दे दीजिए, क्या subject है, हमारे पास teacher तो ये हैं साहब तो हम यही देंगे. No, that's over. That's actually a way to tackle the your maximizing skills and creating jobs, is that whatever talent you have, with that talent you try to change the design of your job. But what we are doing, our own the training institutes are changing according to the strength they have. That will not produce the required talent. So these things, I think, need to be looked in very, very carefully today. And as far as the small, the whole thing has to be demand-driven. It cannot be supply-driven anymore. And the people who are looking after it, or who are running businesses today. So this is on the policy option side, you have to address your education system. Period. And unless your education system caters to the demands of the industry, we cannot succeed. And the sort of companies or the businesses which are already working, when they have problem, what should they do? You mine your own hidden talent in the company. You will be amazed the kind of talent you will find in your own company. You look for the quick learners. You nurture them. You train them. And there is no need to wait for, experienced person with 10 years experience, 15 years experience. You can, I have found it in my own office. The person who has got nothing to do with IT knew much more about internet and everything than an IT professional. So you have to look for these people. These are the people who will, stand you in good stead in your company at this time of change. This is one of the things which I just wanted to share with you. I'll now give you a concrete example how it can be done. Because everybody says you have to skill people and you have to take market signal and then everything else will be okay. In the sphere of cybersecurity, you see there have been various estimates given. NASSCOM says that we should have had 5 lakh people by 2015. Some other one says we should have it by 2022. Fact remains we don't have enough. And it's a very, very important thing to do. You don't realize it. Ordinarily we don't realize it. But you have to take care of your banking system. You have to take care of your railway system, the big infrastructure projects. If you do not have cybersecurity, you can be stumped any day. Israel, without firing a shot, was able to totally annihilate one nuclear power plant in Iran. With what? Cyber attacks. So we have to take care of that. So NASSCOM said this thing. All kind of, substandard institute mushroomed, producing cybersecurity experts. Now, did they have the required knowledge? No. So then what happened? That it is the Data Security Council of India, NASSCOM, and one more industry institute, Symantec. They got together and they laid down qualifying standards for cybersecurity experts. And they listed it for 10 jobs. And they've started working on it. Similarly, there's a project under the Department of Information Technology, the acronym is IC, very interesting. Information Security, Education and Awareness. So they are trying to now train people who can be absorbed in this particular field. This field is going to be about $80 billion. In 2025, just for taking care of cyber attacks, you will need 1 million people. They are not going to, most of them can come from India. These people are being trained here. You have the National Technology Research Organization, which has now been given the responsibility by the government to develop our own experts who will take care of security for these banking and railway and these kind of systems. So basically, I'm just telling you this, I'm giving you this example to say how systematically we can proceed in this direction. Now, we still do not have this manpower, but at least you have mapped the requirement of manpower in a particular field in years to come. And I think this is the way we'll have to proceed if we want to maximize our jobs or want to maximize our skills. It's a very interesting subject they've put, these days it's all Jumla. So this is a very good Jumla. Basically, we are trying to, find out how to skill people. So I'll not take more time. I'll give you one more minute, I think additional minute. And I'll just finish with this thing that if we have to survive, or or if we have to do well in this rapidly changing world which is fueled by technology, we'll have to be very nimble on our foot. We'll have to be very dynamic, we'll have to be very flexible, and our education system has to change. I was once in UK and being interviewed by BBC, and they said what I was doing. I was a district magistrate at that time, about 25 years ago. And very humbly, modestly, I tried to say what were the responsibilities. They said, how can so much power be concentrated in one man? I said, you started the service. So, I got away with that. But the fact remains, we don't change. And the same is happening to our education system. It desperately needs to be changed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Siddharth. And you set the right trend by being very focused. Shift to the other end of the table to Mahesh Venkateswaran, who's right now the Chief Growth Officer at NACIN. But I think what we would really want to hear from him is the NSDC. And where did it go, what happened, where did it go wrong, and what are the lessons, specific lessons that states can learn from it?
Yep, sure. Thanks, great to be here. I think just listening to a couple of the panelists in the morning and from yesterday, I picked up a couple of notes, and I think I will start from that as a reference point. There was this conversation around Amazon, which was sort of fascinating because I think a lot of people said Amazon is putting the second headquarters. There are around 250 proposals. In November, New York Times did an article where they took multiple proxies as indicators of which city would actually get the second headquarters. And they arrived at Detroit to be the city that will win. But Detroit did not even make it into the 20 shortlist. So this sort of tells you what the government is thinking, but what the enterprise is not thinking. And I think that's the disconnect, because the proxies that the government media use are very different from the proxies that businesses use. That's first example. Second example is, I work in a company, I was with NSDC for 4.5 years. I moved to this startup which is based out of Silicon Valley. What we believe is we're building the future of a workplace. We are 22 people in 18 cities around the world. All of us are remotely connected. We don't even have an office, but we scout for talent, right? So in a week, we get from India around 40 plus applications to join. My neuroscientists and cognitive psychologists are in the US. My AI and machine learners are in Israel. My business end of the world is in Europe. A lot of incubation and testing we do in APAC markets and in India and China, Greater China. So some of the programs that we do around refugees, right now my team is in Davos, launching a big program out there, is in Europe. We work in France and Germany. So that just gives you an idea that the future company is not going to be built on a city, a model, and so on and so forth. The model is going to be substantially different. The third example I would like to quote when a lot of people are talking about state-level competitiveness is the following. Germany has a fantastic model called the Mittelstand model. Now, the Mittelstand model, if you look at it, is a model which focuses on small and medium businesses. And there is a lot of lessons for us to be learned. Obviously, a lot of people look up to the German model in that sense. But one of the strong focuses, the businesses are built with social responsibility embedded in it, which is what is good for business is good for society, what is good for society is good for business. And I think that's a strong lesson. So 2008, there was a crisis in the world. The companies that did not fire even a single employee were the small and medium businesses in Germany. And that's because 90% of the companies are family-owned businesses. So there is nothing wrong, fundamentally in family-owned businesses. Two, family-owned businesses are far more robust and resilient if they are tied to the social fabric of that particular place where they are in. The third example I want to give is for a business performance indicator, which is the average time that a person spends in a German corporation is around 4.3 years. The average time a person spends in a family business, a Mittelstand company, is around 7.5 years. So that tells you you're not going to lose employees because you've built a faith system, you've created much more than actually just building a business. So I think I'm giving these examples just as a context of what the future holds in terms of not just future of work, but future of a workplace, future of how a job will look. You don't have to be in the same place. I'm giving you a context in terms of cities don't have to go overboard in actually incentivizing companies. I think if you were to look back at another article which analyzed how Amazon picked up these 20 cities, there were 4 or 5 indicators. One was mass transit system, that all their employees could move freely. They looked at educational investment by the state, so that actually people who are coming out after the 8th or the 10th or the 12th grade are eligible to actually work and employable. They looked at the diversity of talent pool. I think Rahul spoke about Chandigarh cannot be a technology. I think there is much more to building a technology company than just having technology people. You need logistics, you need warehouse, you need food and catering services, you need a whole bunch of ecosystem to operate for a big business to operate. In fact, I would call Infosys to be more of a real estate and a logistics business than an IT company, right? So in that sense, but honestly, I mean, tomorrow they get into logistics, they know how to manage people and how to move goods and people, right? That's the biggest challenge, and any logistics operator would understand that. So I'm putting this in context. Now, I'm bringing it down to the Indian context. Now, what we are doing is, from a skilling perspective, we are saying this is 400 million people in the country. Now, if you actually break that down, it falls like this. There are 105 million people who will be coming fresh into the workforce. That's around 10 to 12 million people a year. That's our estimate, right? I will leave the rest of them who are all in the existing workforce, already employed, right? So you have to retrain them, reskill them, and so on and so forth. Now, that's one part of it. So the people who are coming into the workforce, that's around 105 million people that we are looking at before 2022, they come with different backgrounds, right? They are migrant labor. They are also people in the cities with lower educational standards and so on and so forth. Now, if you were to look at just SMEs, today you go to Tamil Nadu, you go to Punjab, you go to whichever state where there is a Kanpur, whichever place you see a lot of business activity going on, a lot of the labor pool is replaced by migrant labor. You won't find local labor because local labor would be extremely expensive. You can't depend. There's a lot of other factors which are coming in. So when somebody was talking about rural development and urban development, I look at it as urbanization. So I don't think there is rural development and urban development, that idea itself, because 2030 will be urbanizing much faster than we are today. So you have to follow the trends in terms of, if more people are moving out of agriculture, more people are moving out into construction, more people are moving into SMEs, how can we absorb this labor in a way that it's highly productive? Now, to the next strand of it, which is productivity, right? Again, if you look at it, productivity is very important. There is this conversation around total factor of productivity, TFP. India's current TFP is 1.7%. If we have to grow at 9%, we have to be at a 7% TFP. It's a very simple concept. It is, how does capital follow labor, right? Now, there are examples where the tiger economies like Korea and China, a lot of them in the 60s did not have the labor pool that they had. They never had the businesses they had. But what they did is they focused on human capital. They built excellent educational institutions, excellent vocational training programs, which brought in new labor into the market, and the productivity of the labor was substantially higher. When the productivity of the labor goes up, capital will easily flow into that particular place. So they will never have a problem of not being able to access capital. So I think I'll stop there. And I think the point I was trying to make is that until we move into productive workforce in SMEs, we are not really going to hit the threshold of being competitive. If you're not competitive, you're not going to draw capital. Everything else that you can put in a policy guideline is not going to be really as effective unless this particular fundamental thing is sort of picked up, right? So I think I'll stop with that. And
thank you, Mahesh. I think very valid point you made when you give your own NACN example is how SMEs, as part of a larger production chain, value addition network, so you don't have to be a large group yourself, as long as you can specialize in something very focused, have high productivity, and therefore you can grow in that sense. I'm going to change the order that is given to me, and of course request Malti Jain, advisor of the British High Commission, who has been at the World Bank, to give us some of her insights.
Thank you, Chair. and thank you for this privileged treatment. I feel good being the second speaker rather than the last speaker, so thank you. Thank you, delegates, for being here to listen us out on this, on our suggestions and our perceptions on how we can overcome this challenge of unemployment and skills, and especially the term inclusive growth that is part of the caption of this symposium. First, let me say, picking up from the observations made by earlier speakers, and picking up a phrase from the Prime Minister's speech at Davos yesterday, from the red tape to the red carpet. This is the journey that we need to cover if we want us to be competitive, if we want our businesses to be competitive, domestically or internationally. And let me bring some facts to the table here. Perception studies are different. There are certain factual success stories that we can try and flag to help us understand that these things are possible and how far have we achieved on this journey. From Rajasthan, if I say, as being part of the team that stirred the EOTB initiative in one of the backward states, low-income states of Rajasthan, slow-moving states, low manufacturing base, low economic activity, etc., etc. Still, after the initiative of 4 cumbersome years with the government as the advisory and the knowledge partner to the government, we had success stories at the end of the 4th year where we could ground investments in less than a fortnight. Big-time investments, foreign investments like Aisha Polaris was grounded in Rajasthan in just 14 days. So once the ease of doing business is actually traveled and implemented, these things are possible. So let's begin with a positive note. We have covered most of the hurdles. The momentum from here has only to increase. The second, it makes very good economic sense. The Prime Minister has been talking about it at most of the international forums. It has helped us improve our World Bank rankings. Let us accept that the world fraternity, we need foreign investments even more than we needed it yesterday. The foreign investors, the first thing they look at are our business rankings. So now if the interest of the investors in our states increase, there is going to be prosperity. That prosperity has to be shared among the whole of the population. Only that can give us inclusive growth, and that is where skill development comes. If growth happens, and this growth does not translate into jobs, it is not an achievement for us. So that is the topic that Sebastian also pointed out, that as one of the biggest constraint that businesses face because they don't get suitably skilled manpower. Again, we've underlined the need to share good practices among states. Coming from Rajasthan, I would like to say how Rajasthan has been awarded, has been winning laurels for its skill development program. ASSOCHAM has just recently awarded it as the best skill development, the gold award it has got in the best skill development program in the country. There have been the routine programs that the state government runs, which are an offshoot of the central NSDC and the Ministry of Skill Development. We have the short-term skill development programs, we have the long-term skill development programs, etc., etc. But what is different in Rajasthan, they've given us good numbers. They've said in the next plan period, we can expect an addition of about 24 lakh people who will be joining the youth force, who will be looking for jobs. Through their various programs, they seem to have achieved about 2 lakh trained manpower who've been given jobs per year, and 2 lakh under training in the same year. So they seem to have achieved about 4 lakh jobs, 4 lakh skilled manpower per year, while their target is about 5 if they take their projected requirements. So Rajasthan, let us understand, seems to be going on the right track. So what is it that they have done good? The first thing is they have been one of the forerunners. They formed their mission for livelihood back in 2004. They have not only formed a mission there, they have engaged with all the other departments, be it Department of Agriculture, be it Department of Tribal Development, be it Department of Rural Development, be it the Tourism Department. Each department has been given a special target, a special mandate to create skilled, to train people within their departments, and they've been given targets that at the end of the day, their program funds are tied to these targets if they train as many people in their departments. So that is how Rajasthan, I believe, I'm told, is different from the other states. It's not only one skill development corporation that is looking at skilling people, it is the entire mandate of the government. And it is pegged at the highest level, which is no less than the Chief Minister. Any investor coming to the state, she charms the investor thoroughly before giving them the incentive that they need for investment. She makes them sign up a CSR initiative, be it the Mahindras, be it the JCB, be it the KN, be it the ISRO, be it the BIT, be anyone who comes to Rajasthan for investments has to sign off and say that they are going to engage, they are going to partner with the state government in skill development. And the skill development program that is given to them is more sector focused. So it's not about just Rozgar centers, creating skill development centers, training this many people. It's about one commodity organization. Suppose if it is IT, then it is TIE. If it is automobile industry, then it's ACMA. If it is any other sector, I mean, if it is the animal husbandry people, then it's the dairy manufacturers. Sector-based associations are made partners. They are given existing institutions that are ITIs, and then they are given people, they are associated with colleges who have those kind of courses. So it's a very composite kind of a scheme, a bouquet kind of a scheme that the Rajasthan government is running. So at the end of the day, they have understood. I mean, again, going to Arun, who said Chandigarh cannot be an IT state. Let me tell you, Rajasthan recognized it cannot be in the state in the domain of advanced manufacturing or precision manufacturing. They understood that it has to be in the services sector. So all that the Rajasthan government is focusing is on the non-farm sector, on the services sector, on the tourism sector, and on the sunrise sectors, the emerging sectors, be it cybersecurity, be it IT, be it petrochemicals. Again, I was part of a study that was conducted in Rajasthan to identify emerging sectors even before they come into Rajasthan. We identified the aviation sector and the petrochemical sector 3 years back under the banner of ADB. Even before the investment started pouring in, she has signed an MOU with KN to set up a center of excellence in Badmer, one of the most backward districts. So by the time the investments come, availability of skilled manpower is not going to be a problem there. So this is the bottom-up approach that the Rajasthan government seems to have done, which has given them some leverage in comparison to the other most advanced industrial states. They have had some challenges, they have had some setbacks. For example, the housing sector and the construction sector was identified as one of the major employment generating sectors 2 years back. The biggest program of the Rajasthan government was to train masons and the allied tile laying workmen and the fitters and plumbers and things like that. By the time the workforce was trained, the real estate sector almost crashed. So she had that big manpower who was trained for some job, but not getting the jobs. So that was where what Rahul mentioned in the slide, the underemployment and the disguised employment. She did the second batch of skilling for them, and I can vouch for that because my personal vendor who was a contractor, a building contractor, he says he's asked his labor to learn the cooking art. You know, some of the Rajasthan ITIs, they have gone into that mode when they find that some sector is on the slide, they retrain them into other fields. So this is another initiative of the Rajasthan government, which, you know, they are trying to take care of and program it in their 5-year plans. They have had challenges, of course, similarly as globalization, the changes that happen, the robotics and such other sectors that arise. The manpower has to be trained dynamically. That is one of the speakers said earlier as well. So similarly, that is a challenge that Rajasthan is grappling with yet. The second is the gender equality among skilled manpower. Rajasthan is very keen that the female population of the state gets empowered. So we have training partners like JCB. JCB is the only private sector partner who is training female welders. And they've successfully trained, and I'm told it's a big success, and many other companies are replicating it because it seems the female population is more loyal, more dependable, and more regular. So, you know, she's trying to create skilling, she's trying to create the women manpower also skilled in the non-traditional sectors. So these are some of the good initiatives that Rajasthan government is taking, which we feel compared to maybe the southern states have many other advantages, but in Rajasthan, this is the only one advantage that can give us some better growth rates, and that is what she's following. So I think this one exercise at least, and that is why Rajasthan leads, and we've had more investment proposals coming in. So one leads through the other. So if the team leads has conducted surveys on Rajasthan, and it seems on the IT sector, it is the third best destination, I'm told, in the entire country. So it's not very far behind Bangalore or any other so-called, or Pune or anything. So this is how Rajasthan is trying to cover up the gap that it's left behind because of the traditional sectors. So I wanted to share this, and I hope there is an emulation of such policies in all of the states, and we move ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Malti. I think you gave us very specific focused on what a state government can achieve in a relatively short time by doing certain things. And yes, there is a shortage of skills. The Delhi Transport Corporation has vacancies for 600 bus drivers. It cannot recruit 600 bus drivers. We don't have people to drive buses, as simple as that. Sudarshan, Dr. Sudarshan, to bring us his international perspective.
He's very grateful to CUTS, an organization with whom I've had an association from its very beginnings, from 1984. So it's always a pleasure for me to take part in its events, which are, of very high quality, and one aspires to sort of maintain those standards. In the course of our discussion today, what strikes me is that there's a lot of emphasis that's placed on things that government does. Setting up a skills development corporation. We just heard various measures that have been taken with good effect in Rajasthan. There seems to be a kind of assumption that many of these things are, can be manipulated, can be managed. My plea would be for a little more humility in this aspect. And that is because the world is changing so fast that if you say skills, you don't really know, what skills are going to be relevant in a very short time in the future. And your investments in certain kinds of skills today may become redundant or obsolete very fast. I'll give you an example of why to avoid a kind of a hubris that we can fix things. Where India's fertility rate declined first in Kerala, and economists, including the great Amartya Sen, jumped in to offer an explanation as to why it happened. That Kerala has good access to health facilities, it has female literacy is high, women are better educated, and therefore they understand the value of family planning. Then fertility declined in Tamil Nadu. Where infant mortality was high, the female literacy was not comparable to Kerala. And then an explanation had to be found, and that was, the government in Tamil Nadu took family planning seriously. It forced every motor vehicle registering there to say, we are two, ours is two, and forced this consciousness. Then fertility began to decline in coastal Andhra, coastal Orissa. In fact, fertility has declined from the coast inwards, no matter what anybody did in those governments. It just happened. And it happened fairly rapidly. Once fertility declined in one state, the decline in another adjoining state was very fast. So we are left now with the heart of central India, Haryana, Delhi kind of places where fertility still remains high in the flow of... So what I'm trying to say is that we can talk about this scheme and that scheme and what effect it would have. My basic point is that ultimately it's about the quality of education. Siddharth made the point about dynamic human skills. Now, what does that mean? It just means that we must equip people to be able to learn lifelong. Learning to learn is the most valuable thing that education does. And we should primarily focus on that. I mean, it's a very depressing thing to read the most recent report of the annual survey on education report, ASER, as it's called, on educational attainments in in schools. It's frightening. Now, if you look at why is it that China, despite its egregious mistakes, huge human costs in terms of its state-initiated policies, like the Great Leap Forward or the Cultural Revolution, is today where it is because for all these blunders committed by the state in that country, it had made a great investment in educating its population so that everybody can read and write and can follow manuals and instructions. I have to say this because, for instance, in my university, we have Sodexo, which is a multinational company, French-US, maintaining the infrastructure and catering to the students. Now, this company, even though it's multinational and has, presumably high-quality management, has not invested a cent in training the people that it employs, the cooks, the gardeners, the electricians, the plumbers, and they do their job very badly. I can testify to that, having watched it at close quarters for 5 years. And the company has not bothered to invest in them, and when you ask them, it's because they don't have basic literacy. They kind of learn on the job. They do fix, they don't use any instruments. They just fix switches by eye, and it's always crooked. It's never straight. Because they haven't been the basic literacy that is needed to follow simple instructions is not accessible to these people. And so the companies decided, okay, let them do the best they can. With the result, you'll end up with low productivity, and if you have low productivity, there'll be no capital that follows, as Mahesh just pointed out to us. So I think we can, instead of imagining that all these different little schemes and integration and so on is going to make a big difference, we've got to first understand that the primary thing that we need to do in this country is to make a serious investment in improving the quality of basic education. One isn't even talking about, education in sophisticated areas. It is for basic education. See, all of us, we don't remember what we learned in university. What we gain is learning to learn and to quickly learn. That's what we've learned, and we've learned to become a certain type of person. Since I'm a teacher, I have to say that I recommend a new book that's just come out. It's called Dreamers: How Young Indians Are Changing the World. It's by a person I don't know, an author called Snigdha Poonam. It's just been published by Penguin, and it's a fascinating book about young Indians and what kind of people are they and what are their expectations. And you see, instead of all these elaborate statistics, Santosh Mehrotra can quarrel with the Skills Development Corporation on whether the estimate of the number of people to be trained is correct or wrong and so on. We can engage in all of that. But the basic point is that we need to get a grasp of what this new India, what young people in India are all about. And what is it that we owe to them, and what is it that we should be doing for them. And I'd say that what we should do for them is give them an opportunity for a good education. And after that, you can, worry about, training, vocational, technical, and so on. But if your primary education is not of high quality, then I don't think very much can be done. So I would once again emphasize that, and generally say that if you do that, which is a lesson from China. The big advantage that China has over India is that all of its people can read and write, and we can't say that of our population, and we have to catch up and make a difference to that. So I won't take more of your time, but I would recommend that you read the book that I mentioned, because it points to what we ought to be doing to get a pulse on the kind of new India, young people. Why is it that they are getting excited about Gaurakshak? Why? I mean, what are the motivations? These are the things that we need to understand. And we need to understand that our education must also inculcate certain values and civics and civility and being able to get on with one another, for boys to learn how to respect girls and girls to learn how to be assertive. These are the things that we need. It's all very well, we do all sorts of schemes and so on, but that's the business of government. Each government wants to produce a new scheme and give it a new name. Sometimes it gets caught in a web of words, whether it is, reform, perform, transform, red carpet, red tape. These are all words. The bottom line is education. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudarshan. That is a tall order, thank you. And I hope the dreaming you talk about, the dreamers dream wide awake. Otherwise, what is the point of it? I would now request Sri Anil Bhardwaj, Secretary General, Federation of Indian Micro and Small and Medium Enterprises, to tell us.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Kurtz, first of all, for this opportunity. And as FISME, we are happy to be associated with you. Thanks also for keeping this agenda of competitiveness on the table, which is extremely important. In a hugely compressed format of 7 minutes, I would try to share with you a couple of comments on the context, then few observations or insights, basically, of the practitioner, because as an organization we are running large number of skill-related programs also, and thirdly, a couple of suggestions. So let me first begin by saying that, as you know, that approximately 1 million people are coming out of agriculture every month, and approximately 10 to 12 million people every year into the job market. If you look at 2004-05, 2009-10 period, only 2.7 million jobs have been created. So all those people who are coming out of the agriculture in the job market, where have they been absorbed? Had they not been absorbed, they would certainly be on the streets, and India would be facing chaotic problems. Fortunately, they might not have been absorbed in the formal sector, but they have been absorbed in the informal sector. When we use these two terms, informal, formal, and organized, unorganized, I think let me spend 30 seconds to explain. Formal enterprises are the ones which are registered enterprises, registered with the requisite authority. They would also be registered perhaps with the Labor Department, surely with the Tax Department and so on, whereas the informal enterprises would not be. When it comes to organized, unorganized, organized is a term, is a legal term. So all enterprises that fall under the category of Factories Act, they are organized. Rest of them are unorganized. So even if they could be a large company theoretically, which could be a formal enterprises, but might not be an organized sector enterprise. Second point, which is important, which I intend to bring to your notice, that the Indian capacity of harnessing entrepreneurship is something that we have to worry about. The MSME sector contributes approximately 17% of the GDP. But if we compare with our competing economies or economies that we want to compete, for example, Singapore, 50% of the GDP is contributed by MSMEs. China, 60% of its GDP is contributed by MSMEs. In Taiwan, the number is 85%. And we have to address this question, and we have to ask this strong question, why MSMEs, why there are not enough number of MSMEs in the country. One of my previous speaker mentioned about the German model of Mittelstand, which is essentially medium enterprises. In India, it is absolutely reverse. We hardly have any medium enterprises. We are talking about 6 crore enterprises in the country, but you would be surprised there would be less than 25,000 medium enterprises. So we fail to scale up. We start with micro enterprise, very few then perhaps grow up to small enterprises, and when fewer ultimately come to the medium enterprises. And medium enterprises are the enterprises that ultimately are the robust, resilient, and they have the proven model. And that is why they are the ones that create jobs which are in the formal sector. That is the segment that is missing, and that's why it is called in India the missing middle. As FISME, as I said, that we are essentially under the DGET and other labor-related programs and Ministry of Entrepreneurship and Skill Ministry. We are a national skill assessment body working in 12 states. So we have got some experience, or we have drawn some inferences that I would like to share with you. The first is that there are n number of skill development programs in the states, within the state by different departments. Then, of course, the central government, different ministries. Even if we have now a Ministry of Skill, perhaps that was conceived to bring in all the related programs under one umbrella, but we still continue to have competing programs. Second problem is that the manufacturing itself in the country is shrinking, which is highly worrying thing. And it is important to understand why it is happening. After 1995, after signing of WTO, all manufactured products right from the day one are subjected to the discipline of imports. That means all items could be imported. Whereas in the services sector, it is not there. So let me explain this by giving an example of scissors. Scissors is a manufactured product. We already have a cluster in India. It's made in Meerut, approximately 80 kilometers from Delhi. Those manufacturers are facing competition if they manufacture scissors from China, from Korea and other countries, Taiwan. But the barber and the hairdresser is not facing that competition. So it is not the services that are facing the competition, it is the manufactured goods that are facing the competition. And that's why, which sector is growing? It's not the manufacturing that is growing, it's the services sector that is growing. So that's why the need of the skills that we have been discussing, I think we have not really thought of it, which are the sectors ultimately growing and what kind of skills would be needed. And that is not reflected in the 24 skill sectors that we see. And India needs mass employment for sure. But the trend that we are seeing is very different. Most of the employment is being generated in the formal sector by capital intensive manufacturing. We had a Maruti plant in Gurgaon and also in Manesar. Of the same capacity number of cars, they put up a plant now in Gujarat. The cost is very high, the capital intensity is very high, it's very capital intensive, but it is not labor intensive. The number of labor has been reduced by almost 1/10, and that's a hugely worrying thing. Now, let me come to quickly about that what perhaps needs to be done. See, first of all, there is a disjoint between the skill discussion on the skills and about the basic learning. I think one of my predecessor speaker has said it very rightly that we have a huge, weak foundation skill. I mean, our education system is so weak that no matter what kind of skills we are going to provide, they would not be riding on the bandwagon for continuous growth. It is almost impossible. It is increasingly becoming evident. So we have to emphasize this, that there cannot be a shortcut that you skill people who are completely either uneducated or not educated enough, and then they will start, we can say, their journey towards a productive engagement. Then, finally, one important point that I want to share with you is that currently the technical skill gap is not really much of a worry. That should not be much of a concern. Because ultimately the technical gap is nothing but an indication of a dynamic economy, that our economy is dynamic, we are creating jobs. I'll just take 30 seconds more. But our concern should be our education system. Our concern should be that whether our training mechanism, training institutions are adjusting and keeping pace with the new demand. What we are proposing or thinking is that, we have to do this by facilitating flow of information. See, information is kind of a public good. No private sector would be creating it. It is the government that needs to create flow of information with regards to that which are the sectors which are growing, where we are competitive, what is likely to happen in future. That kind of information is not coming at present. The second is that by providing the right incentive to the schools and universities and institutions to be responsive to the information with regards to the skills that would be required. And third, by carefully investing in raising their capacities. These three things are important. Number one is about provisioning of the information, and two, by providing the right incentives, and three, by building their capacities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I dislike using cliches, but in Indian English we have a cliche called last but not the least. So, Prachi, over to you. I'm sure it shall not be the least.
Thank you, sir. And I realize I'm the one standing between you and the lunch, so I'm going to try to make it as crisp as possible. Good afternoon, everyone. I am grateful to Kutz for inviting me here with this esteemed panel and audience. I represent the Just Jobs Network. For those of you who may not know us, we are an applied research organization that focuses on one of the most pressing questions of our time: how to create more and better jobs and a workforce to match. And the issue we discuss here today is very relevant, especially in the 21st century world of work. I would like to disagree with one of our previous panelists that the change that we are confronted with is a slow one. In fact, the kind of mega trends that are happening all around the world, technology, automation, urbanization, migration, trade in global value chains, it's unprecedented in its pace and scale. Just to give you an example, in 1950, there were about 750 million people in cities. And between now and 2050, India and China alone will add that many people to their cities. And we heard from Mr. Mahesh how his current organization works across the globe with people spread all over the place and working without offices. So that's definitely a change which we haven't seen before, and that's something that is changing the way we live and work today. And particularly in India, where on one side we have our industries and SMEs that are struggling to find appropriate resources, to stay competitive, to stay inclusive, including human resources. On the other side, we have about 356 million people between the ages of 10 to 24. 356 million, that's more than the entire population of United States. So how do we address this sort of gap? How do we prepare this 356 million people to come and work in these industries and SMEs and other kind of jobs? How do we harness the demographic dividend of our country? Just Jobs Network recently completed a study on education to employability in South Asia. And what we found was that most of the South Asian countries, including India, are underspending on education. Where the international standards talk about 5 to 6% of GDP to be spent on education, we are spending less than 4%. And it's not, spending on education does not necessarily mean that you focus on enrollment rates or you provide some sort of training. Because our report also found, and as Sir mentioned, our Sir report also concluded that high enrollment rates does not necessarily mean good learning outcomes. I mean, if 1 out of every 4 class 8 students cannot read class 2 text, I mean, I'm sure there's definitely something wrong with the quality of education we are looking at there. And to fix this, what we've done is sort of brought in skilling to the rescue. We are providing quick and basic 3-month, 6-month training programs to these people. But the question needs to be asked, can a 3-month training program really band-aid the years of poor foundational education training that these people have gone through? And more than that, and as Sir mentioned previously, employability does not encompass only technical skills. There are other skills that are as important to employability, and you all being employers would resonate with this. There are foundational skills, basic literacy, numeracy, knowing the computer. There are transferable skills like problem solving, decision making, creativity, communication, critical thinking, financial literacy, leadership skills, and finally citizenship skills, which are now defined as skills that inculcate a sense of belongingness to the community, to the society. And these are all skills that are important that anybody would look for in people that they hire. I remember I read somewhere about something that Warren Buffett said about his hiring technique. He said that he looks at 3 things in a potential hire: integrity, intellect, and energy. And I'm sure all of you here would agree to that. So how do we achieve this? How do we address this problem of quality of education? We need to bring employability in mainstream employability across education at all levels. We need to move from more academic and academic orientation of education to a more employability oriented education right from the primary level. Where ease of doing business, we've been talking about ease of doing business since yesterday, and it's good. But I think another indicator for economic growth, for inclusive growth, is jobs. Our organization has pioneered in creating the Just Jobs Index for the world, and in 2014, India ranked 139 out of 148 countries at providing just jobs, which looks at quantity as well as quality of jobs. We are now working towards creating a state-level index for India in itself, and when the results come out in a couple of months, we will be able to see how different states fare in the quality and the quantity of jobs that they are providing. But I would like to just conclude by saying that what we need is a more effective strategies for industrial engagement. We did this event with the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, and we had consultation with the Sector Skills Council, and a lot of them are still struggling with, and given the structure in which they are made, they are still struggling with effective industry engagement. They are struggling with bringing industry participation in their training modules in different states, and that's a great challenge, because we need to identify where is that premium, where do we find that premium that industry is looking for that would incentivize them to come on board with providing the right kind of training that our people need. What we need is greater political will. Anything that can drive, the only thing that can drive all of this is politics that works for development. And instead of accounting for accountability, we need accountability for outcomes. I would just like to conclude, and I agree with Sir. I don't want to go into the numbers of it and how many people are entering the labor force and the workforce and all of that, but my profession entitles me as a researcher to sort of just drop in a comment. So it's 12 million people in the country are entering our working age population, and those that are entering the labor force every year are about 5 to 7 million, but that does not mean that the challenge is any less, and that we need to address the problem right at the core instead of band-aiding it from the top and trying to window dress it. Thank you.
Thank you. There are, I think you very good, in the beginning you said the mega trends. In fact, the changes are happening at such a rapid pace. Change which we expected to happen over the last 50 years is finally happening at a pace so fast that the educational system, our teachers and our students are just not prepared for it. And that is the thing. But there are solutions, it's not that they aren't there. How to link up industries with ITIs, as the example Malti gave of Rajasthan. Things can work, it's not that they can't work. So let me now, and it's not just a matter of numbers, the quality is equally important. As in education, enrollment rates going up is very good, learning outcomes are also an issue. Creating jobs are important, the quality of the jobs growth factor is also important. So now I'm opening it up for questions, specific questions. If you want to have a longer piece, Cuts is right there. You can pass on your whole argument, your whole piece to them. Yes, a very specific piece directed at any specific person. I have one person here and one there. And third, I'll come to you. Yes, sir.
All the panelists, and I would like to basically compliment them for the valuable inputs which were put forth. Education system, I think, has been challenged by all the panelists present here. Sir, do we realize how the admissions are made? When a child is born, the parents, 90% of the parents decide that he's going to be an engineer, he's going to be a doctor, he's going to be what? Because they have certain this thing which they have failed to do and they want the children to do. When I speak to the children in universities or colleges, 90% of the children tell me that they are in the course because their parents wanted them to be there, not by choice. Only 8% of only 2% of the children are there in the courses what they are doing because they are there by the choice. And
what is your question, sir?
Sir, my question is, one of the panelists mentioned academic oriented to employment oriented education is what the today's need is. How we can do that?
Thank you.
We need to change the mindset. That is what is important.
Thank you, sir. There, yes, please.
So my question is, do you have examples of how any medium or small enterprises dealt with the problem of education with the workforce? You know, any examples of how they used innovative techniques or methods to empower this unskilled labor and make it more productive?
Right here.
Sir, the issue that education in the schools, raised by in the very starting presenter, Mr. Rahul, as he said that the education is not being provided on a proper way in the schools, so that could be implied of. And every panelist replicated the same thing. I think the solution is there. Solution has been provided by our Prime Minister, but not on the right way, I think. If at all the skill development sectors have been taken to the schools instead of the separate institutes, then all the problems could be solved. Students studying along with the skill development, they will develop themselves and all the problems get solved in the school level itself. I think it's the solution.
Right, thank you. My question is not directed to any specific panelists, but generally speaking, whenever we do reforms and whenever we do such conferences, we always hear this term called political will. Can somebody explain what this political will is and where does one find this? Thank you.
Lovely.
And yes, my last question is, so my question is not to particular any panelist. What are you observe that we are talking about the education, skilling, so that they should be applied in MSME. But when I look at the stage of MSME, when he has to reduce his cost, MSME cannot reduce the raw material cost. He cannot reduce power and fuel cost. He cannot reduce interest cost. He can only reduce one cost, that is resource cost. So we have to see, is there any system by any government, in our state governments, that we should be in a position to protect MSME in getting sick? At any case, it should not be closed down. If it is closed, if it is getting sick, if we allow them to become sick, what will happen? Right. Loss of economic activity, loss of employment. So that is the issue which needs to be addressed first. Skilling is okay, but ultimately you are looking at MSMEs for employment.
Okay, I'll take one more last question here. Yeah.
We are limiting the education to the businessmen. We are asking Mahindras to provide education. We are asking businessmen, business organization to develop the skills, do that. Where are the educationists? Are there no educationists in the system or Indian society who can educate people? I've been a teacher. I'm a graduate engineer, master's in technology, and I've been teaching graduate engineers. The colleges in Punjab are run by businessmen, not by educationists. And this is the problem why we are not able to develop Punjab or North India as an IT hub. We can do it, but the will is missing.
Let's now reply to it very quickly. Before I ask my panelists, I want to make 2-3 very quick points. One is the point made about child in school and parents deciding which child are we talking about. The 10% cohort which goes to university or the 90% which drops out at class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4. So let's be clear, whom are we talking about? It's the poor. What we are looking at today is a vast majority of people who are first generation learners who have to be equipped to work in industry, and the best way to lower cost for an SME is to make the SME more productive by giving the SME the option of hiring a skilled person. A skilled person lowers cost because it raises productivity. But SMEs closing, don't be too all over the world, things which fail, bad business decision, exogenous factors should be allowed to die. We're keeping it forcibly alive, But the idea is to support them by supplying them quality manpower. The question of political will is possibly the most difficult question to answer. But as we have seen the specific example she gives of Rajasthan, okay, to me, the example given of Rajasthan may be slightly on the extreme case, but the fact is that specific points of time, political leadership has taken the decision and gone through and implemented it. And when a political leadership is clear in what it wants to do, as somebody who has studied Indian government for 40 years now, I can tell you it gets it done. I think demonetization is a classic example of our decision taken, a decision for which the system was not prepared in that sense, because the moment you prepare for it, you leak it out, and therefore you can't prepare for it. Was implemented, whether you like it or not is not the point. The fact is, the government of the day was able to successfully implement demonetization. Trouble with our system is, and Siddharth is not there, is that we are very good at doing things in a shock. The cyclone Falin in Odisha, we were able to evacuate 150,000 people. Amazing, amazing job. We are far more difficult. We run the Kumbh Mela camps outstandingly well. Outstandingly well. Sorry, Sudarshan is here, he's Dean of Public Policy. To sustain this kind of improvement requires a marathon at the speed of 100 meters. That is where, but I think what we are facing today, I don't think so we have the luxury now to sit back. I do not think we have the luxury to really sit back. And no, sir, nobody expects the Birlas and the Tatas or the Bajajes, no. But what every industry has to do, and they do it all over the world, the example he gave of Germany, once you've hired a person, you invest in him, you invest in her for your selfish benefit. I want my employer to be able to adapt to new technologies. Employer remains the same, technology changes. But the basic foundation, if I ask Infosys to prepare engineers, that is a disaster. The system should be providing people with a minimum skill level, at which point the particular industry has a vested interest in her employee. That is the point, So it's no easy answers to anything, no easy answers. I seem to have answered all the questions. That is because I have a flight to catch. So I cannot afford the session to go on for too long. So can we thank all the panelists? Thank you, all of you. Lots of food for thought. There were positive stories also, so just not only think of the negative stories. There are positive stories, what can be done in the short term and what required fundamental shifts. The trick is to know the difference. Thank you.